Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, "Okay, you can have the parking spot." This happened a while back when I live in a pretty populated city in Southern California, so people always jockey for parking they feel entitled to. One day I was going to have my partner over, and because I lived in an apartment complex without street parking, I had to go find a spot and reserve it for him, so he wouldn't get towed in the middle of the night. I go out and check to see if any of the visitor parking spots are free at the time and none are open. I'd been in the complex long enough to know that at least one parking spot opens up after about 20 minutes. So I set a timer, go pack in and noodle around for a bit. Timer goes off and I go out to check. Ta-da, parking spot opened up. Hop in my subcompact car and head over to grab the spot. Now, this spot is small enough that most compact vehicles barely fit into it. And it's right next to guard post for the automatic gate in the complex. As I drive up, I'm positioned so that I have a wide enough left turn to get into the spot. Enter player 2, middle-aged white woman driving an SUV. I wave her past assuming she's looking to get past. At this point, I'd had my blinker on to turn left into the parking spot. So, she knows I'm here for it. She rolls down her window and yells, "I'm here for the parking spot," and I say, "Oh, so am I, sorry about that." And she then yells, "I've been waiting for that spot." And I respond that I had been too, and I got here first. Now, I knew she couldn't fit her car into that parking spot without me moving out of the way. She'd have too tight of a right turn to make for her car. A few more seconds, maybe 20 had passed, and now she starts to yell at me how I'm a stupid duck and how she'd been waiting for that parking spot. At this point, I just shrugged my shoulder and mouthed sorry back at her. Well, she was not about to lose what thought was rightfully her parking spot. So, she does the unthinkable and guns the right turn. I hear the loud crunching of her car as the entire right-hand side of her car caves against the guard post. I'm in disbelief as to what I just witnessed, but take a breath and drive back to my parking spot. Go upstairs and tell my roommates what just happened, and we all share a good laugh. She sure showed me she was going to have that parking spot her car be damned. I set another timer again for later. Ta-da, another parking spot. Next one is titled, "Short and Sweet, City Folk Come at the Farmer." I grew up on a dairy struggling every day 365 to help my family live. About 10 years in the farmer's land next to us has a single house built onto a small plot near the irrigation riser, and a younger family from the city moves in for a quiet life in the country. Over the next year, the cops are at our place a dozen times about smell complaints, noise complaints, work started at 5 a.m., tractors and all, and other complaints about anything this family could think of, basically trying to get us shut down for existing outside the bounds of their imagined country life. In the winter, my dad would drive our tractor around to all the neighbors' houses on our mile and dig the snow out of their driveways so they could drive to work, a costly and time-consuming endeavor, but one of the main things a farmer can do to gain praise and feel good every day. Well, about 3 weeks into winter, this guy from the new house shows up at our door asking us to not do his driveway so early in the morning because it was waking him up. My dad explained he had to do it at 5 a.m. because he did it before he started the other chores that took hours. The neighbor insisted he do it later, or not at all. That was the last time my dad did his drive. Turns out, you have to wake up about 5 a.m. to use your snowblower to dig out your own car if you want to get to work on time. Next one is titled, "Won't Help Me Get to Work. Okay, I'll find my own way." My friend is educated as a carpenter, and this is a story from the time he was an apprentice. As it is with apprenticeships, being the apprentice means a lot of hazing from the more senior members of a company. This also happened to my friend. He had a 35 to 40 km drive from his home to his workplace, and as he wasn't 18 yet, he had to drive on a moped. Doing his apprenticeship, the company got an order for some work to do in a bigger city, a 2-hour drive away. He asked his boss whether he should show up at the company earlier to catch a ride with the other carpenters. However, the boss, deciding to be a jerk and join in on the hazing, said no, he would have to travel there by himself. He would, however, be compensated for travel expenses, regardless of how he managed to get there. Okay then. So he devised a plan. For the entire week, He showed up at work on location at the bigger city, always well-rested and suspiciously not seeming like he just had a 100 km drive on a moped. The week after, when the job was done and everything returned back to normal in their home city, my friend came to his boss with the receipts and nearly gave the boss a heart attack. The boss figured traveling expenses meant paying for gasoline, which was his mistake. To the boss' surprise, my friend took a flight from his town with an airport to the small airport in the city they were working in. For the entire week, he had taken a flight to and from work, saving a lot of travel time using the most expensive travel option possible. How had he been able to afford this? My friend's father was upset about the hazing, and when they wouldn't give my friend a ride, his father had had enough. He would pay for the travel expenses for going by plane, teaching the boss a lesson. When everyone had figured what had happened, and in the following days picked up their jaws from the floor, everyday life resumed. Even the boss, bitter about the bill, could see the funny side of things, and my friend stayed with the company until he got his degree. Next one is titled, Manager told me to ask the dishwasher for help, so I did. For a little backstory, I used to work at this fast food place. The manager never did their job and let it fall on everyone else. For many different reasons that would take a whole other post to mention, I decided to quit. When I turned my 2 weeks notice in, the manager ripped it up and threw it away. Then went on about how they were so upset that I decided to leave. They usually took it personally when someone quit. 2 weeks later, I'm working my last day. The manager scheduled me to close and do deposit for my last night. Usually there are 2 cashiers, 2 runners/baggers, a dishwasher, and at least 3 people in kitchen plus a shift leader, me. My last night, the manager scheduled the 2 cashiers, 2 runners/baggers, and the dishwasher. However, only scheduled 1 kitchen worker and me. I called to request online ordering be turned off, which was normally done when we occasionally had less than 3 kitchen workers. The manager would sometimes just cut it off when they didn't want to do a lot of work that night. However, the manager denied my request because they would get in trouble. I complained that there's no way we could do all online, dine-in, Togo, call-in, and third-party orders with 1 kitchen worker and me, who had to deal with customers, system problems, up in the kitchen, and supervise the other workers. The manager told me that if I needed extra help when the orders got too backed up to call the dishwasher up to the lines to help for a minute. Good idea. I pull one of the runners into the kitchen to expo and have one of the cashiers rotate between the register and running when the runner needed help. I asked the dishwasher to come up to the line to help at about 6, and we were slammed until closing at 10. We had been 30 minutes behind on orders all night, so the dishwasher did not get to any dishes that night. I go to do deposit, and the dishwasher starts walking towards the 3 sinks, full and floor full of dishes in the back. I ask what she is doing, and she answers that she's going to do the dishes. I tell her that her shift was over, and she could go home. She says that she doesn't want to get in trouble for the dishes. I tell her that the manager said I could call her up when I needed help, and that I needed her help all night and not to worry about it. If the manager said something to say that I told her not to worry about them, what are they going to do? Fire me? She leaves. I finish deposit and leave the 3 sinks full and floor full of dishes and go home. Never heard a word from the manager about the dishes. I asked the dishwasher about it, and she didn't get in trouble for it because it was my call to not do them. For the record, the manager has left sinks full of dishes multiple times on the nights they closed if someone else was opening the next day. I knew the manager was opening the next day after my last shift, so payback. After trying to make my last shift a disaster out of spite, I made the manager's morning a disaster by having no dishes to open with. Next one is titled, Don't stand next to you on a crowded train. This is what you get instead. I live in London where the underground is pretty busy during rush hour. The train that was due had been held at the previous station, so by the time it reached the station I was in, it was sardines in every carriage. I stepped into a carriage near the door and stood next to a guy who was standing by the door. At least 2 layers of people pushed in past me in such a way that I didn't even need to hold on to anything, apart from my backpack, which I removed and held in front of me by its straps, because people who don't remove their backpacks on a crowded train are the absolute worst. However, due to being squeezed so tightly, my elbow kept being pushed lightly into this guy's side every time the train braked, and I had nowhere to move because we were all crammed so tightly. Before I could look at him and apologize, he rudely shoved his arm really hard away from him. The train braked again, and he repeated his shoving, so the conversation went like this. Me. Can you please not do that? Him, with barely suppressed rage. Well, you keep elbowing me on the side. Me. I don't intend to, but I am holding my bag and I am being pushed. Where do you expect me to move to? Him. Well, every time you elbow me, I'm going to shove you away. Don't stand next to me if you don't want that to happen. Me. Do you honestly think I want to stand next to you? We are all trying to take this train somewhere. It's not just you. We are all being squeezed and crushed here. Him rolls his eyes. So, I decided to comply with his request to not stand next to him. At the next stop, I shifted and made space to allow any new incoming passengers to stand next to him. A big guy with a duffel bag took my place and stood next to him, and I could see the guy being bumped and elbowed again. I caught his eye as he glared at me and I smiled back sweetly at him. The next stop was a woman with a boxy handbag with sharp corners, even better. For the next 7 stops, I made sure to subtly move in such a way that any newcomer would stand next to him, and he ever got a moment without being shoved by more and more passengers and their luggage and limbs. And I kept smiling at him every time he looked at me, and he kept glaring at me for complying with his request. Last one is titled, You Want Thick Cheese? You got it, lady. I work in a grocery store deli. Normally it isn't busy, and most of the customers are friendly, but there's always that one old lady who has a vendetta with anyone behind the counter. Unfortunately, I just so happen to be the only person behind the counter. Good evening, ma'am. Is there anything I can help you find, Todd? Before I can even finish, she, the customer, cuts me off, a personal pet peeve and immediate red flag. Give me a half-pound of yellow American cheese, she demanded, and cut it as thick as you can get it. Give me is red flag number 2. That's when the gears in my head start turning. As thick as I can? Okay. We have a dedicated cheese slicer, and it can cut chunks up to 1 inch and 1/2 thick. So, without even speaking, I retrieve the cheese, turn the dial to as high as it'll go, and then back some cause the slicer turns itself off from the strain if you cut it too thick, and slice off that gold brick before placing it on the scale. By this point, the brick weighs about 4/5 of a pound and Karen is absolutely flabbergasted. With that all too familiar customer service smile, I print the label, place it in the bag and say, Is there anything else I can get for you today? She responds, No, and takes the bag and leaves in a huff. About 10 minutes later, after I assumed she went to harass the meat department and whoever else before going to the customer service center, the store manager, head honcho and total bro, came back to the deli and asked what happened. Apparently, she complained about me. He says, Hey Jay Hondafish, a woman just came up front and complained about some cheese you cut for her. To which I reply, she said she wanted it cut as thick as I could get it. We shared a laugh for a few seconds and just told me not to do it again. Thanks for listening.